this is Michael Uslan. You're listening to Batman on Film.
I'm vengeance.
I have given a name to my pain.
The Batman.
Always waiting for some Batman to save you.
It's simple. We kill the Bat of Gotham.
I'm Batman.
Hello, Krypton family, and welcome to this episode, number 1 of the Superman on Film podcast. SOF is a sponsor and a member of the Superman podcast. Oh boy, I see what hold up, listeners. Excuse me for just one moment. I got carried away with myself. I'm very excited for this episode. Just give me one moment here. Hello, Bat family, and welcome to this episode number 201 of the Batman on Film podcast. BOF is the sponsor and a proud member of the Batman Podcast Network. Check out all of the shows over at batmanpodcastnetwork.com and follow us on Twitter at BatPodNetwork. I'm Garrett Grev. Listen up, Bat family. I'm hyped today. You can hear already I'm getting a little bit carried away. But before we get into the goodness, I always want to tell you that you can follow me on Twitter at Garrett Wado. You can email me topics, suggestions, feedback, maybe lists of your favorite Superman comic books. That'd be cool. I'd love to read those over at my email address. That's garrett.grev@batmanonfilm.com. As always, thank you for listening. Well, we just celebrated 200 episodes of the old podcast and the last episode that dropped, and we've done 200 episodes of this here podcast without ever focusing on any other hero besides Batman. And maybe that isn't too impressive, right? It's a podcast for the website, Batman on Film. However, I think it's pretty notable given how many heroes the Cape Crusader pals around with, right? Like there's a whole bunch of them. Surely at some point we should have or would have done an episode on a different hero besides Batman. At this point, we haven't. But today we are. And instead of focusing on the dark and grimy Gotham, we're going to turn the Bat telescope lens to a bright, shining beacon city on the hill. That's right, Metropolis. And that means we're talking about the big blue Boy Scout, the man of tomorrow, the last son of Krypton, and Batman's best pal, Superman. That's right, Superman. Not just Superman. We're talking Superman 78, like OG Superman. New comic book hardcover collection is released, and we have a very special guest that's going to come in and talk to us about that. First of all, I'm going to introduce a guest before that guest. He's also very special to me. He's one of my very best pals. No, it's not Jimmy Olsen. You know him as the man who straddles between two state lines. The master of Mountain Dew variants, the librarian of the Batman Book Club, and once again, I don't know if this is a TeePublic podcast t-shirt I'm looking at, but it's a Batman t-shirt, and it is like Jim Lee has drawn this man in real life. These pecs are bouncing. It's Mr. Ryan Lauer. Welcome aboard, Ryan.
I'm like, are you for hire to help pump me up?
Yeah, like every day
introduce
before
me into everything. Just I'll just go on a Teams call with work, but have you just narrate and introduce me, and then I can just come walking in like I'm Stone Cold Steve Austin or something. The glass is broken, and then you pound a beer real quick and you slam it. Yeah.
And then you say, and then
oh,
you flex,
hell yeah.
And then you flex the pecs, just like a wrestling intro. I think that's exactly what they do in wrestling.
How you walk, you flex them and you walk. But yes, this is a TeePublic t-shirt. There we go.
TeePublic t-shirt.
But
this is real Indiana right there.
Yeah, right. Thank you for the as Winifred Sanderson would say, for that marvelous introduction.
Well,
but I appreciate it. Thank you.
We've got a big show tonight, and I'm really glad you are coming aboard to help me with this, because it's a superhero proportion worthy of Superman we have the writer for the acclaimed Superman 78 miniseries that's joining us. He's my pal on Twitter. At least I like to tell people he is.
Your pal.
Yeah, Robert Venditti. Venditti is a great guy. He's going to join us in just a bit for a little bit of a conversation about him, his work in comic books. Really interesting story on how he got started in the industry. And then, of course, the topic of the hour, Superman 78. But before we do that, Ryan, no show would be complete.
Damn it. Come on.
Without a Superman edition of the trivia show Sweeping the Nation. No, it's not What Are You? It's Who Are You? A Friend.
Wait! Who are you?
A friend.
All right, you didn't think we were going to do this, but I did it.
I thought I got out of this.
No, So listeners wouldn't let me do it. Here it is. This is the Superman themed trivia game that will be sweeping the nation. It the same rules as What Are You? Only this is Who Are You? Of course, Lois Lane's famous question after the helicopter rescue scene in Superman the movie. I give you 3 standard difficulty clues. The goal is to get the answer correct before I give you all the clues. So fewer clues, better, kind of like golf. The 4th clue is a giveaway because we want everybody to have fun. Ryan,
just give me the 4th clue now.
Solo mission, baby. I got you. This is a character, and away we go. Clue number 1. This character has had his persona, occupation, and origin altered many times, including when and how he met his main rival. Who are you? Ryan doesn't have his hand up. We'll move on to clue number 2. Number 2, in post-crisis continuity, this character was responsible for the creation of several of Superman's major villains. Who are you? He's got his hand up. Mark him down. This is the earliest I think Brian Lauer has ever answered a version of a trivia game show podcast I've hosted.
Yeah.
Listeners, you're playing at home, so I'm going to give you the remaining clues. Clue number 3. The character once had himself cloned, and his consciousness transferred into his clone's body. Who are you? And clue number 4. Whether he's a mad scientist or the president of the United States, this character is nearly always smooth and shiny on top. Who are you? Ryan Lauer, after 2 clues, you thought you had it right. You're an honest young man from what? You feel like you Indiana folk.
The cornfields.
Yeah, the trustworthy, right?
Yeah.
What was your answer? Who are you?
I tell you what, I almost put my hand up after question 1, but I didn't know if it was Lex Luthor or Otis. And then you said number 2. And I said, that's got to be Lex Luthor.
It is Lex Luthor.
Woo!
What an incredible job, Ryan.
Thank you.
See, I bet you were like, I can't believe this guy's doing this to me. And now, look at you, just like an all-star. You're not...
you know what? I cave under the pressure of Peter Vera. That's what
he's very intimidating.
He's very intimidating, for sure. Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's Ben. Who are you? All right. Lauer, just a quick little blurb of news, mainly because I made a soundbite that I want to use, and then we're going to get to the main show with Mr. Venditti here. So let's get into the news.
Crime wave in Gotham. Other breaking news. Water wet.
All right. So there's been a ton of conversation, in the recent weeks leading up to San Diego Comic-Con. Of course, then Henry Cavill did not end up showing up at San Diego Comic-Con. And there's been news since then that Warner Brothers has talked to Henry and his people. They're maybe not quite on the same page about how to proceed forward. Maybe he wants to come back, but he wants some creative control. Maybe they want him back, but they don't want to give up all that creative control. And the internet's been a buzz about Henry Cavill, like more Henry Cavill talk than anything I've seen since, season 2 of The Witcher.
Yeah.
It's a lot of Cavill going on. And of course, we've also had news coming out about, what does news and speculation about what does Warner Brothers want to do with their DC properties? And a lot of people are saying, hey, we think there's going to be a total reboot, on the horizon. Since we're talking about Superman today, I wanted to ask you this, with all this news going in, if you had your druthers, Mr. Lauer,
yes,
would you have Cavill come back, or would you go hard reboot? And if you do bring him back, how much do you think you have to soft reboot for this to work in the plan? What's the plan, Warner Brothers, going forward?
It's really, I don't know. There was a hesitation in this sense, when we were in this point a few years ago with Affleck and Batman.
Right.
That I did not want to. I wanted to figure out a way to make it work, because
I was right there with you.
I liked Affleck as Batman. I liked him in the suit and everything. And I'm like, yeah, I want a solo Batman movie with Affleck. I don't want to have to worry about them finding another person and starting over. Find a way to make it work, because it's just, it's something new, can make you hesitate. And I think I'm a little bit, and I think this is a little bit of the Midwestern in me, there's a little bit of like nervousness of changing the status quo.
Oh, we like our old timey stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I was used to Affleck in the role. And I was looking forward to what he could do. So that Affleck left and we got a new one, and how'd that work out?
Great. Worked out great.
Great. Listen to the last episode of the BOF podcast. It worked out pretty damn good.
Yeah, we both have that new thing at number 1 in a list of 12 Batman movies. We said that, or number 2. Bill and I, like way up at the top. And you had it number 2 as well, didn't you?
I did. Yes, I did. So, good memory.
Yes, right. So
with that said, to answer your question, they do what needs to be done. They just announced that there's a 10-year plan coming. So don't you think that when they bring somebody on, allow that person, just like Reeves, just like Nolan, just like Zack Snyder, of find your...
Sure. It's a good point.
Your person.
That's a really good point.
But the fan in me wants Henry Cavill back. Right. I really do, because I just feel like, what did I say about Zack Snyder in the last episode? You mentioned his name, you start fires, and I only like fires to roast wieners and make s'mores.
You sure did. I used that line with my kids twice since we recorded that.
Excellent. But I just feel like Cavill, he has such a passion for the character. I think he's great as the character. I think that I want to see what another creative team can do with him in the role. So that's the easiest thing probably would be just cast a new one. Superman has been I don't know, he has not been the home run that he should be, and that, I know it's been new regimes, but hasn't been what they wanted him to be. So I mean, I don't know that general audience would be like, what? Where's Henry Cavill? Because apparently Henry Cavill was done with Superman 5 years ago, so but the fan in me, it's still just I want to see the guy with a different creative team.
Yeah.
Because I just have a lot of faith that Henry Cavill would flat out, he could be he could hit that grand slam that they really need and want Superman to be with the right creative team. No, I don't think it's been his fault.
I think it's the right iteration. To me, it's the fan in me says keep Cavill, whether it's an actual soft reboot and maybe you change some things about the origin, or you just have a different tone going forward. I want to see him. I would love to see Cavill play, a Superman akin to what our upcoming guest Robert Venditti would write Superman as. I intend to ask Robert about what makes Superman to him, and knowing from how Robert writes Superman, I think it'd be a little bit different, and I think it would work. I would love to see, and Cavill said as much himself, right? He wants to really do Superman, the hope, the optimism, the shining light, and where he kind of thought he was going to get to take the character following, what we've seen already. So it's news that, it's not, I don't know if we're going to get anything definitive anytime soon, but it would kind of be nice to just, what's the plan, Warner Brothers? At least with Superman, right? At some point they're going to have to say either, hey, we're welcoming back Henry for another crack at this bad boy, or we've got some plans, we're going to move on.
I'm eternal optimist, and so this is a new regime. Apparently, it seems like they understand the priority of DC. They understand the priority of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. Well, two of the three. I don't care what people say about Wonder Woman 1984. That's a hard one to really tell on how successful and what do you want to say? What audiences thought of it, because it was such a weird time to judge movies. But I mean, people love Gal Gadot. So, I mean, I just feel like of the Trinity, 2/3 of it are in really good shape. It just seems like they're ready to make Superman what Superman should be. So, he's a priority. Who plays him? I don't know, but I do hope it's Cavill.
Well, if I had my druthers, I would at least they don't always cross over like this in the old Warner Brothers land, but there's an example of somebody that had done this in the past, Jeff Johns, who got to take his knowledge and love of the characters and apply it to the movie world. There's a guy that followed Jeff Johns on one of his most famous runs on Green Lantern that we get to talk to in just a moment here, Robert Venditti. And I tell you what, if Venditti could give some creative consulting to what to do with Superman moving forward, I would absolutely love that. So, Ryan, let's bring him on in.
Okay.
Robert, thank you so much for joining this episode of the Batman on Film podcast, special Superman edition. Couldn't be more pleased to welcome you on to the show. Of course, for our listeners, you probably know Robert from one of the many titles he's worked on in the past, including The Surrogates, which was adopted into a major motion picture, The Flash, Green Lantern, which our friend Peter Vera says he believes your run on Green Lantern even rivals Jeff Johns' run on Green Lantern. Justice League
him already. You know?
Yeah, right.
I've never met the guy. He sounds like a good dude.
And an Italian Yankees fan, sir.
We got to stick together. You know what I'm saying?
Hawkman, Justice League, and of course, the book of the hour, Superman 78, recently released in a hardcover collection. Welcome to the show, Robert, and thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, guys. It's a pleasure to be here. This may be the first podcast I've ever done with Batman actually in the name. So I'm making a special dispensation here, which I don't normally do, being a Superman guy. But let's get past that and let's just all get along. You know?
We're all allies here, right? Fighting the greater good. The greater good.
A Justice League, you might say. Yeah. And, for me, I talk about this, the listeners know, for me, Batman and Superman's kind of like picking my favorite kid. I have one, but I'm not supposed to, So
tell us which one.
That change. It depends on the day. You guys know this. Yeah. Batman and Superman. It's tough. It's a 1-2 punch for me. And some days you'll get me, and it's like, I think Superman might be my favorite. More often than not, I'm on the Batman side of things, but it is really neck and neck for me.
For me, there's I'm kind of similar, where it would be different is there's there's Superman, and then there's probably like 742 other characters, and then there's Batman. So
it's just a little different, right?
Yeah, like Batman comes in like right below Buona Beast. You know what I mean? So it's like it's close. It's close.
Who's he above though? That's the real question.
Gary, you should have warned me. I wouldn't have worn a Batman T-shirt to this.
Well,
I mean, I don't dislike him that much. I did. There's a lot about Batman that I actually do like. As a writer, I didn't ever feel like I would be a good Batman writer. I've never really tried nor pursued writing Batman, or it was always Superman for me. And it's just aesthetically, Superman is more in line with what I was always drawn to, even as a kid before I read comics. Batman is a much darker tone, and there's great works of art that are Batman focused. I mean, I love Dark Knight, obviously Dark Knight Returns and all that kind of stuff. But just for me, aesthetically, as far as what I would want to write and what I feel like I'd be good at, it's much more of a Superman thing than a Batman thing. The one thing I would say about Batman that does legitimately bother me is the way that everything kind of has to go through Batman, like if you go buy a Lego set and you just want Superman, you got to get Batman. Or
Batman's there with him.
If you get an Aquaman Lego set, like Batman's got a little sub Batman suit, or like the Green Lantern Lego set have Batman in a space suit or whatever. It's like, come on, man. Like everything doesn't have to go through Batman, you know, like these are great characters on their own. And so is Batman, but you know.
Yeah.
It's funny because for years and years, it was kind of Superman was that guy, you know, and then you get into the 80s and then it switches where, you know, anything DC had Superman attached to it for what?
Sure.
You know,
I could see that. Yeah.
40 years, 45 years. And then, you know, Frank Miller in the mid 80s and then, you know, to Tim Burton. And then it's kind of became its own behemoth. And now it's almost like they swap places.
So we're blaming Frank Miller. Let's blame Frank Miller. Let's do that.
I love those original Batman movies. I love the Batman 89, like Michael Keaton Batman, Jack Nicholson as Joker. Like that stuff's great, you know. I love that stuff. But it was done like those Tim Burton movies were, I mean, a lot of it's Tim Burton, right? But they were done like they were serious movies, but they didn't take themselves seriously, you know. They had fun with it. And the idea, like I love the Batman animated series, you know, and how it really embraced like the weirdness of the canon and like the fun of it, you know, with the ventriloquist and the little gangster doll, and you know, like leaned into a lot of those things that were really fun about Batman. I feel like contemporary Batman, like the Batman movie that we talked about on Twitter recently, you know, like the new Batman movie is so dark, you know, it's just so dark, and that's just not. It doesn't mean it's not good art. It's just not what appeals to me. As an audience, you know, nor is it what I would want to create, you know, as a writer. But that doesn't mean it, you know, it shouldn't exist or I hate it or I don't like I like that people like it. It's fine, whatever. I don't care, you know. But I lean much more towards the brighter and the hopeful rather than the doom and gloom, you know. So
since this is Batman on film, and then we can leave Batman in the dust. We've always got to ask somebody when they come on though, like, would you say that 89 is that Batman movie is your favorite Batman movie then?
Yeah, it's my favorite Batman movie for sure. I appreciated Dark Knight when I saw it, you know, like I saw it in theater and I was like, whoa, they did it. Like they made superheroes completely believable. You know what I mean? Like they really did it. But I feel like we're still living in the wake of like trying to, it's a little bit like Watchmen, right? Like Watchmen came out and it was such a transformative work. And it was such a great work of art, but in some ways, I think people took a lot of the wrong lessons from it. You know,
oh man,
and they just
totally
leaned in to all the darkness as opposed to what the story was actually trying to say. And I feel like maybe the way Batman has been handled sometimes in the wake of Dark Knight, it's sort of similar. You know, so it's like. At this point, the next Batman movie is just going to be shot in the dark. You know what I mean? It's like there's not even going to be lights. You know what I'm saying?
You made that point.
How much darker do you get? Like it's come around like a circle almost. Like I was watching the most recent one, and I actually found it funny and was laughing because I was like, it's so dark. You know?
It is dark. You made that point on Twitter, and I was like, I can't even say anything because he's not wrong, right? Like this is a fair point. The last episode of the show that we recorded, it posted the last week in July. It was kind of your standard, you know, movie podcast trope, rank the movies, right? Yeah. And we all ended up with Batman 89 pretty high. And, you know, we sort of mid-tier down the list, but something everybody really had really positive things to say about was Batman Forever, because you sort of got, you know, although like in hindsight, people think it's kind of campy, it was much more heroic than what we've gotten with a lot of Batman. And I think
Forever.
Forever was Kilmer 95.
Okay, I didn't mind that one.
It was before they went off the deep end with and Robin. It was kind of a little bit of a lighter mix. The intro, actually, the credits, they kind of do a Superman 78 visual effect that calls back to
kind of a long time since I saw it.
Yeah.
It's Nicole Kidman too, right?
It is Nicole Kidman.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I remember not minding that one. I like the two Tim Burton ones, but I feel like what happens with a lot of those films, it's a common thing, not just Batman, but it happens with a lot of superhero films. It's like Batman 89 was Batman versus the Joker, you know?
Right.
And then the next one was Batman versus the Penguin and
Catwoman.
the Catwoman, and also Christopher Walken. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, Max
right?
Shrek. Yeah.
And then the next one was like, it's like Two-Face and the Riddler and Sugar and Spice, and now we got Batman and Robin, and so it's like the story starts to break under its own weight of too many characters. Like when it's one hero, one villain, I think you can do that in 2 hours. One hero and two villains, maybe. Once you get beyond that, and you've got multiple heroes and multiple villains and all this stuff running around, like you're still in the constrained space of, a 2 hour film, and it's similar with a comic book miniseries, right? Like Superman 78 is Brainiac, and you get a little bit of Lex Luthor in there, but he's really more supporting cast than villain, right? And it's like if you try to pile too much in there, I think it becomes about none of the villains, and it starts to lose itself a bit. And I feel like that's where that original Batman franchise went. It sort of just started to break under the own weight of just adding more characters on top of more characters on top of more characters. And it gets to a point where you just can't handle it anymore,
Which is kind of funny because, Batman 1989 is so, well known for how important and how vital the villain story is to make that movie work. In a number of ways, it's kind of a Joker origin story more than a Batman origin story. And it was a real big focal point. And then you're right, that did sort of get watered down, which becomes challenging. If we'll see if history repeats itself. It did during the Spider-Man franchise, right? They made with the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, made those same mistakes.
Yeah, it did. And then as they kept going on, they just kept adding more characters, and then the Christopher Nolan Batman films, right? Like you started out with just, I don't know how to say his name, but Liam Neeson, I don't know how to say his character's name, Ra's al Ghul.
Ra's or Ra's al Ghul.
I hear Ra's all the time.
If you want to be snooty about it.
Yeah. And then in the second one, you have, the Joker, and you also have Harvey Dent in there a little bit, right?
Right.
And then in the third one, now you've got Bane, but you've also got Catwoman, and it's like it just
and Talia.
And it just starts to break,
Before we get into Superman, I'd love if you could tell the listeners, those that might be out there and unaware, you've got a pretty unique history of how you broke into the industry. If we could learn a little bit about that, I think that'd be really helpful. And then we're going to ask you a whole lot of Superman questions.
Sure. So I didn't read comic books growing up at all. I obviously knew who characters were from general, sort of pop culture immersion, right? There was a Spider-Man TV show when I was real little. There was a Hulk TV show, and I watched that stuff. I did, watch the 78 film and Superman 2 and those things. And we'll probably get to that in a little bit. But it wasn't until I was into my mid to late 20s that I picked up my first comic book. I always knew I'd want to be a writer, but I'd never read comics. And when I read my first comic, which was Astro City Volume 2, Number 4, it's the beginning of the Confession story arc. I was like, wow, this is really cool. And I was in graduate school for creative writing at the time. And I'd been writing like literary style fiction and things. When I read that, I saw like this real character-centered approach to heavily genre stories. And that really appealed to me, sort of taking these literary principles of character-centered narrative and applying it to genre stories, right? Which is something that Stephen King excels at really well, right? So I decided I wanted to write comics. I didn't know how I was going to get into it, didn't know how I was going to do it. So I ended up volunteering to pack boxes in the mailroom of a publisher called Top Shelf Productions. And at the time, I would say it was probably not well known. They've gone on now to do like John Lewis's March trilogy was them. So they're the publisher of the very first National Book Award winning graphic novel. Blankets was by them. They published From Hell. They published Jeff Lemire's first work, Matt Kent's first work, Nate Powell's first work, Jeffrey Brown's first work. So my first work. So while I was working there, I wrote the script of my first book, which is called Surrogates. I gave it to the publisher, and I was like, this isn't the kind of stuff you normally publish, because they tended to do more literary style books. But if you read it and you think it's good, I'd appreciate it if you'd introduce me to some other editors, just to maybe see if I can get it put somewhere. They read it and they liked it, so they ended up publishing it themselves, which I was very glad about because I'm still really good friends with the guy who runs Top Shelf. And so they published my first book, and I stayed on as an employee. I worked there I started working for them in 2002. I sold them the script for The Surrogates in 2002. It came out in 2005, and then I worked there all the way through 2012. So I worked there for 10 years. Yeah.
Wow, that's a long run with a publisher. You don't typically see that in modern day comics. You sort of, we'll see some of the writers that will shift across different publishers or maybe jump back and forth a bit. So that's quite the run.
I was working for them as an employee all that time. You know what I mean? So for me, like I never wanted to be in a position where I had to take a gig to keep the lights on, Right. And so like I had a day job at Top Shelf where I was still doing the warehouse stuff and managing their inventory, but it was a very small company. I was the first employee they ever hired full time. And so I also did marketing stuff. I did some editorial. I traveled to conventions and did booths and all that kind of stuff. That paid, that was the steady income that paid all the bills. And then that allowed me to take the jobs that I wanted to take as a writer and sort of manage my career in a way where there really isn't anything that I hope nobody knows that I did. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
Yeah.
Like that guy did
remember
that
one, like there are definitely projects that don't come out necessarily the way you want them to. And that's just natural, but there's nothing that I ever took to keep the lights on that is a gig that I hadn't taken, You
don't have a title someone can look at and be like, well, Venditti needed to, fix up the Buick. That's why, that's why I wrote this one.
Yeah. That's really cool to hear though, that you've just kind of been in control of your writing career. Like I feel like there's a lot of people that don't, they do what you just kind of said of like, oh yeah, I don't talk about that one or I don't talk about that one. So it's cool that you get to embrace like basically everything that you've done.
Yeah. I mean, there's downsides to it, right? So like I wasn't as productive as maybe I could have been in those early years, in the way some people are that just kind of throw themselves into it and do nothing but write, or, what I mean? Yeah. I still had a job where I was working 60 hours a week and I was writing on the side essentially, I did that for 10 years, all the way up until I started writing Green Lantern. And so during that time, I didn't produce as much creator-owned stuff as maybe I could have. And so I don't have this big back catalog of stuff that's out there just churning. You know what I mean? So there's always hindsight is 20/20, The way I try to look at it, approach to life in general, there's going to be things that don't go the way you want. There's going to be negative experiences you have or negative people or, whatever. But I try to kind of look at things as like bricks in a wall, I try not to focus on the bricks. I try to focus on the wall. Right. And so like, even if there's a project that didn't come out the way that I wanted, and there's definitely been those, I still learned something from it. And if I hadn't learned that, then maybe I don't get to Superman 78 or projects that I am really proud of, So I try not to go back and second guess myself because that can go on forever,
Right.
I just try to focus on the wall and not the bricks.
Man, that sounds like something, before we started recording or talking a little bit about sports, that sounds like something like a good head coach would maybe have hanging in their office wall or something.
All right, guys,
let's
I don't know. My coaches made me run laps.
I know.
It's
like if Ted Lasso was your coach, that would be
there you go.
Ted would have, right?
Ted might say it.
Well, you just mentioned Superman 78, and I know you said thinking about early exposure to comic book characters and heroes. Was Superman 78 that introduction to Superman for you, or were you aware of him through other means?
No, Superman 78. Actually, I don't recall watching 78 in the theater, right? I know I must have, but I don't recall the actual theater experience. My first memories of watching it are watching it on TV. Superman 2, I definitely 100% recall being in the theater and watching it. And it wasn't just my introduction to superheroes. To Superman. It was my introduction to superheroes as a concept. Like I really wasn't aware of superheroes much, what they stood for and, what they were all about until I saw Superman 2 in the theater. And it's like a foundational memory for me. I remember the end when he comes out of the particle chamber and he kneels before Zod. And in my little kid head, I was like, I don't know what the world's going to do now. Superman lost his powers.
Right.
Like, I believed it. I thought it was real, And then he crushes his hand and the music swells, and just the elation that I felt, and I don't mean to sound, I don't even disingenuous or like I'm trying to make myself sound like, a saint or whatever, but I try to be a good person, and I was like that way even when I was little. I wanted to believe that people were good people and that we're inherently good, not inherently evil, and that, the majority of us will do right by each other and help their neighbors and things like that. And so here was this person on the screen that sort of embodied all these things that I wanted the world to be, and even now that I'm grown up and the world can be a pretty dark place, like I still believe those things, because for me, personally, what drives me as a writer, if I thought that we were all inherently evil and, we don't want to help each other and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know what would get me out of bed in the morning and make me want to write stories, and that's not to say that those stories shouldn't exist or, there aren't great stories that are written that way or any of those kinds of things. I'm just saying for me, aesthetically, the type of art that I like to enjoy and the type of art that I hope to create is stuff that is life affirming and tries to build up and be aspirational as opposed to, negativity and tearing things down and all that kind of stuff. So.
Oh man, I could sit and listen to you talk about this forever. So, I mean, this is, Ryan and I have a lot of conversations that are off mic and we talk about like, hey, this is what I like. And the aspirational and inspirational nature of superheroes, and in particular Superman, but there are others, but I think Superman is kind of the beacon, is really sort of what I sunk my teeth into as a kid and still like just has a big spot in my heart, right? That motivating, inspirational sort of idealized version of good. Like, I think there's something really special there. And when I read you write Superman, that really shines through. So
yeah, I feel it, that's the way I look at it. And when people talk about Superman, it was, just like a week or two ago, it was all going around Twitter again, about how Superman's not relevant or he's too much of a Boy Scout or whatever. And I think how sad that there are people out there that don't think that somebody would do the right thing just because it's the right thing to do. Like, right. What does that say? I think most people are that way. Right? Like, we would have to be, otherwise the world would be just chaos,
We would have blown it up by now.
Yeah. So like, it always befuddles me when they say he's not relevant or like, how do we make Superman appeal to a world in dark times? Like that's when he appeals even more, right? Like when it's dark, light shines brighter, And I also think, bringing in Batman a little bit, I think that, when there are efforts to make Superman dark, like the reason why Batman works, in my opinion, is because he is darker than Superman or Green Lantern or the Flash. Right? He's darker, he's brooding, and all those kinds of things. So if you take Superman and you try to make him dark and brooding, what do you have to do to Batman to make him work? You have to make him even darker and more brooding. Right? You have to keep darkening Batman as you darken the things around him. He has to get darker until he's like pitch black. You know what I mean? Like that. This is the whole point. The reason why Batman works and the reason why him being darker works is because everything else is so bright. And so I don't know. Maybe I'm an idiot. That seems obvious to me.
No,
but it seems like
you are not an idiot.
That I don't know. Often isn't dealt with.
But I think that's the difference in how a writer thinks through how to make these things work and where is my in, right? Because I think sadly, a lot of consumers of today's pop culture and comic book stuff and superhero stuff is just like, I want it to be kick-ass and I want it to be cool. And, like this is sweet. This looks awesome. And there's no thought to like, why do we care about these characters? Why have they continued to live on in our consciousness and in our media for decades and decades and decades? Like, what's the end? And I think what you just walked through is a perfect example of you don't have to think like a writer, but when you hear somebody explain it, I think it explains why, and we don't need to get into it because it can breed up all sorts of controversy, especially on the interwebs, why some interpretations of these characters have not worked. They might have dedicated fan bases, but for the broad audience, they just haven't clicked the same way. And if you that contrast to the bright is so key. I couldn't have said, I would have never been able to say, I bet Robert tells us this, but hearing you say it, I'm like, of course he said it. It makes perfect sense to me. Dang it.
Yeah, I mean, I will reference something that clearly you're not talking about. Non-controversial guy that you are.
No.
When I saw Man of Steel, and there are things I like about Man of Steel. You know,
Yeah, me too.
there are beats in that film that I think are great. But again, it almost looks like the film was shot in a world that didn't have like light bulbs. You know what I mean? It's like a filter over it, where everything is just dark and whatever. And it just, I don't know. For me, aesthetically, again, doesn't say those things don't have a right to exist. You know what I'm saying? But for me, aesthetically, it kind of misses the point. You know, like he is bright, and that's not hokey. And like there are very few things on the planet that you could jump out of a plane anywhere on Earth, and wherever you land, people are going to know who Christopher Reeve Superman is. Like they just know it. They know he's got a curl, and they know he goes like this and the S. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They know who Batman is. They know who Spider-Man is. There's very few things. Like it might be just those three, maybe Wonder Woman. You know, but like there's very few things that are that ubiquitous on a planetary level.
Yeah.
You know? So clearly, there's something about it that inherently works. You know, so just lean into the things that work about it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Because whatever's made those things endure, just find new and interesting ways to embrace those same things, those same qualities, and I think you're home free, you know?
Now, Garrett, I have a question for you. Can we hop into Superman 78? Because I have a lot of questions for Robert about this book.
Yeah,
a lot of
absolutely.
questions. Robert, you interact with a lot of people on Twitter and such, so I'm sure you forgot about this, but when it was revealed of the what the dust jacket was covering for this hardcover, I responded to you and said I'm going to double dip because I bought every issue, and you said I think that's a great idea.
We got you. We made you spend money twice.
Yeah,
I love
all
guys
because
like
of the VHS hardcover print.
Yeah.
But yeah, you got me, and I have zero regrets. There we go. Zero regrets. But I don't know. I'm fascinated by the idea when I can still remember last year when this announcement came.
Oh yeah.
Of the Batman 89 comic book series and Superman 78 comic book series. And I mean, it just felt like finally, for once, all of us comic book nerds were like on the same page of like, we are getting what we want.
I was it was like a kid on Christmas. Like, I'm just like, this is the greatest thing that I've ever heard of. They're doing what?
So the fact that there's two different stories, but doing the same kind of approach of like revisiting these iconic versions of their characters. Can you just kind of say, how did this happen? Yeah. How'd you hit the lottery?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for double dipping. It means the world, you know, so much pressure goes into a story like this, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's Superman 78 is a comic that people have wanted to see since 1978. And for whatever reason, it never existed, you know? And so when I got the call and it was like, you're going to the show, it's like, man, I better not mess this one up. Because there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on this one.
Yeah.
So the editor, to back up a little bit, going back to the beginning, like I didn't read comics much growing up, right? And so all those years I was working at DC, they would come to me with characters and ask me if I wanted to write them. And it became like a joke because even with like Green Lantern, the day they called me and asked me if I wanted to pitch for Green Lantern, I was like, I'll be honest with you, I don't know anything about Green Lantern. Like I know he's green and apparently there's a lantern, but I don't know what it says. And they were like, cool, you know.
That's all you need to know.
And it was like that for everything. For Hawkman, it was like that, you know. Like I didn't know there was a Barry Allen and a Wally West. I just knew what the Flash was, you know. Like the things that basically everybody takes for granted. I had no knowledge of any of those continuities or anything about these characters. I think it became an asset for me because you can't fake stupid, right? Like if I had spent my whole life reading these characters, I would have all these preconceived notions in my head about them. And I would already know that Carter Hall, the archaeologist, cannot ever be the same guy as Katar Hol, the Thanagarian space cop, right? And so maybe I wouldn't have come up with the idea to make them all the same guy. They're just different reincarnations of the same person, right? So I think not having a background on any of those characters for good or bad, became what allows me to do stories maybe differently than other people, because my first experiences to these characters was when I was a grown-up, not when I was a kid, right? But I would always, everybody at DC know the one thing that I knew about was Christopher Reeve Superman, because I watched him when I was a kid and I loved him, and I would often tell the story that I just told you guys about sitting in the theater, Zog, Precious Hand, blah, blah, blah. So when this story came around, Andrew Marino, who is an editor that I've worked with on a lot of things at DC, I did Green Lantern with him, Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps, Hawkman, Freedom Fighters. We've done a lot of stuff together. He very well knew about me and Superman 78. And so he told me they wanted to do a miniseries with it, and he asked me if I wanted to do it. And man, I was over the moon about it, because the top of the mountain to me was always a chance to write Superman, and I'd done a little bit of it with the Man of Tomorrow, self-contained series, did 11 of those stories, which I'm also really proud of. But I never thought, to say it would be a dream job would be wrong, because I never thought a Christopher Reeve Superman story would exist, because clearly it would have existed by now. It's been a long time. It's very popular, right? So when he came around and asked me, I was over the moon about it. And all he really said was that they want to do Superman 78. It's going to be 6 issues, and they wanted Brainiac to be the villain. And then the story just kind of built out from there. But I want to give credit to Andrew. I mean, a lot of things. He's a great editor. But the whole VHS concept for the design was all him. That was all his idea. And he gave it to the DC in-house design people, and they obviously brought it to life. But it was his concept to make it look like a VHS tape. And the same with Batman 89 and all that. And so, there was such a huge, when I put out a photo of it on Twitter, there was such a huge response to it, and that's just the whole team, from me to Wilfredo on art, Jordy on colors, Dave on letters, Andrew's, participation in his guiding the whole project, him concepting that out, the design team executing it as well as they did, that's just everybody clicking. And those instances are really rare. And so I'm always super grateful when they happen.
Can you talk us through how that team got pulled together? Because you think a project this big, right? I assume they're going to go and they've got some people in mind. And if not how the team got put together, how did you kind of find your groove working together? Obviously, the process of creating comics it's not like, filming a TV show where everybody's in the same room doing the same job at the same time. But what was that creative process working with that group of partners on this?
Yeah, so Andrew built that team, just in the same way that he reached out to me. He knew Wilfredo Torres was a huge fan of the Christopher Reeve Superman films, so he reached out to him. I had never met Wilfredo, even though he lives probably less than an hour from me.
Oh, really? How about
that?
First time
I met him was at Motor City Comic Con this year when they did a big event for Superman 78.
Wow.
That was the first time I met him, because even during COVID, we didn't get together or anything.
Oh, yeah.
So Andrew put that whole team together. Working with them was great. I mean, Wilfredo's very early sketches, you could tell the love he was putting into it, and such a great person to work with, but also really was able to do some things and make them look effortless when I don't really know people understand how hard it is to do. Like, he was really able to capture the way Christopher Reeve acted as Clark Kent, with the drooped shoulders and the swinging arms and all that kind of stuff. He was able to capture that in a static medium in a way that is super, super difficult, And there were other things that we tried to do, like the first time in the series when, the first S moment, which is, I think, page 10 of the first issue. Yeah, there you go. I wrote it into the script, and if I was writing that as a normal comic book and not a Superman 78 comic book, I probably would have given them a line of dialogue there or something like that. But I wrote in the script, we're going to try something here. Let's see if we can just draw this and have it be silent, and people will hear the theme.
Oh, when I saw that page, it was like I was watching a movie. I'd seen this before as a child. Like this story with what was going on in my mind, I had already seen this sitting in front of my TV in my parents' living room. It captured it so well. Yeah. And Wilfredo's style, you're right, it seems effortless, and I'm sure it takes an incredible amount of talent and hard work to pull it off. But the art style isn't overly involved, right? It's not hyper detailed, but it looks like Christopher Reeve on every single page, right down to the way Superman smiles. It's impeccable. Impeccable.
Yeah. And when the first issue came out, we're all nervous on that day because it's the day where you find out if you did good or you didn't,
Right.
Yeah.
And the response to it was so positive, and so many people were just like what you said. They posted that photo and were like, I can literally hear the theme.
Yeah.
But think about how hard that is to take a static medium, print it on paper, and use an image to invoke something auditory, right? Like, think about that.
It's wild.
And so Wilfredo was able to do that with the story, and it's just such a good feeling to have that. But again, speaks to how ubiquitous this version of Superman is. That all these years later, it is the version of Superman that people think of when they think of Superman.
So how quickly did not fully completed script, but I guess the story you wanted to tell, how quickly did that come to mind for you?
Pretty immediately,
Yeah.
I had never thought about writing this series before, but in my very initial notes, I sort of had the idea. I mean, I guess we're going to do spoilers, right?
Spoil away.
The idea, like, if we're going to use Brainiac, I wanted this to be a Superman story, of course. And I think if you read other times I've written Superman, you can see how it's sort of the Christopher Reeve version of Superman in terms of, how he behaves and like what he stands for and things like that. But I really wanted this version of a Superman story to be different than a Superman story I would write in Action Comics or the Superman title or something like that, because it is different and you are building a different continuity. So I really tried to sit down and be like, if I was going to do a Brainiac story and the only things that existed before this was Superman, the movie, and Superman 2, how would I do a Brainiac story, And so I started to think about how much screen time in those first two films Richard Donner used towards Lara and Jor-El, like a lot of screen time. And it seems like he must have had some kind of grander plan, and Mario Puzo as well, the screenwriter, some grander plan to use those characters in some way, And so why not have Brainiac capture them and put them in the bottle? And that was kind of where the whole story came from, that Superman would have a chance to go in the bottle and meet his birth parents, but then be faced with, where does he belong?
Yeah.
Is he Kryptonian or is he human? And how do you make those choices and all that kind of stuff? And I thought it'd be a different kind of conflict that you could put together for the story that is something that we haven't seen in the comics. So it breaks sort of comic book continuity that Jor-El and Lara would be in the bottle. But I think film-wise, it makes sense within the context of what had been built in those first two movies. And for me, it's never explicitly said, I get asked it all the time, in my headcanon, the Superman 78 graphic novel happens after Superman 2 and before Superman 3. So,
well, you just answered a question that I had, written down on the list that we'd get to. So I appreciate that. Did you get any pushback or concern about bringing back, so to speak, Jor-El and Lara, or was it like, hey, go for it, you got the story, what do you want to tell us about?
I don't recall that, but I mean, I justified it in the same way that I just explained it to you.
Right.
I think if we were making a film that adheres to the principles of those first two films, it seems like this is something that they would do, because even, and I think this is true, within the context of the comics, I want to say that Kandor was the capital city of Krypton, but then Brainiac took it and it became Kryptonopolis, right? So if Brainiac was going to take something before Krypton exploded, he would have taken the city where the head of the Science Council was hanging out.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So, like, to me, it all makes sense,
Especially in his, quest to document, knowledge across all known galaxies. Like, Jor-El's the premier scientist. Why wouldn't he be in there?
Exactly, yeah.
And really, in 78, like, the Krypton we see, from anything we can tell, just has like one city, right? It's sort of like barren, icy wasteland, and then one
I'm sure
city
there's more cities on there. Yeah,
down in like an icy crevasse, they've got more cities.
And I mean, in the comics, Kandor would have been taken like a long time before Superman was even born, right? So if they're telling me we're going to use Brainiac, then I have to find a way to put Brainiac into it in a way that fits with the continuity of the films. And then I also had the idea that there's sort of these competing versions of Brainiac, right? Like there's the green skin Brainiac, but there's also like the skullhead robot Brainiac, which is like super cool. And I love the way it looks. So how could I try to use them both, right? Mm-hmm. So like you make the skull ones like robot drones of the green skin guy. And now you get to show the fans versions of Brainiac that would be competing in the comics. You know what I mean? So it kind of frees you up to do a lot of things creatively and make your own rules in some way, as long as you don't break the basic principles of who Superman is, you know?
It felt like it was probably a coincidence to me, but I thought it was really interesting that both Superman 78 and Batman 89 use the movies as a jump off point. And in your story, it was Superman 78. And then I really got some like, kind of superpowers era 80s DC Brainiac look feel. And then in Batman 89, you start with those 89 movies, and then it moved into kind of Batman the Animated Series, a lot of influence there. Yeah. So it's like you kind of got this live action thing you loved as a kid and the thing they were doing in the animated world kind of smushed together. So both stories, but in particular, going back and getting to revisit Christopher Reeve, quote unquote, in the role years after his passing was like really pretty special to me. And I've actually been talking a lot about recently how much I love the superpower stuff as a kid, that era animated action figure line. So to get a little bit of both was pretty awesome for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a once in a lifetime story that you get to do. Feel super blessed to be in the position where I was able to do it, and like. It's one of those things like, the bricks in the wall or whatever, you know what I mean? It's one of those things where like, I don't know where my career goes from here. I don't know what I do. Like 5 years from now, I might be digging phone lines or something, but nobody said I didn't write Superman 78.
That's right.
Darn right.
I mean that's always going to be there, And so it's a project I'll always be extremely proud of, because we didn't shy away from all the things that people say are hokey or corny or not relatable about Superman. Like, not only did we not shy away from them, like we leaned into it all the way. And the response to it was still super, super positive.
So you kind of said about how, important of embodying Christopher Reeve's Superman, but also, just as much the Gene Hackman Lex Luthor. It's OR. Luthor.
Yeah.
But specifically, it almost felt like every single scene you had to make sure to change one word of the greatest criminal mind of our time, the sharpest criminal intellect of like, and just like as much as you could hear that Superman theme when Clark opens his shirt, reveals the S, like I can hear Gene Hackman,
right? All the way through it.
Every single scene and saying some of this stuff. And so, yes, Superman's the focus, and he's number one for sure. But even the supporting characters, I think, just bleeds right through, and you can just hear it.
Yeah, which is true of the films too, right? Lex Luthor just absolutely shined in those films, and it's the one time I've been able to work on a project, like I was saying, where I knew the continuity, and like it was also freeing in a way that like. When they asked me to write Green Lantern, I went and read 300 issues of Green Lantern. When they asked me to read Hawkman, I went and read like everything of Hawkman that had ever been printed. You know what I mean?
Put in the work.
All I had to do for this is sit down and watch 4 Superman movies.
Yeah, that's great.
That's it. And I'm literally sitting on the couch watching Superman, taking notes, and I'm like, this is literally my job right now.
I'm getting paid for this right now.
But it's just like really trying to embrace those characters and like. They didn't say they wanted Lex to be a part of it, but it was like in my mind, how can we make Lex be a supporting character in some way? And how would he act and how would he behave? And, what could we feed Gene Hackman, to make the story compelling? And it's like, Lex is down and out. He's living in a shitty apartment. He's going on job interviews for his parole officer. You know what I'm saying? And like, really kind of, start them at the bottom again and see where that leaves them, just super fun. And again, Will Fredo just really leaning into it and being able to capture how all those characters, acted and behaved in the films, throwing in a ton of Easter eggs, the Lex armor and like the Bizarro tank and like, all these little things that he throws in there all over the place. And just him just giving 200% to every page, and it totally shows in the work, you know.
He draws a heck of a Marlon Brando as well, too. I was like, geez, that's Brando. It says Brando in 78 right there. What else could it be?
Yeah.
You said Easter eggs, so I've got to ask if there was anything that you had mentioned to Wilfredo of putting in, or if it was kind of all him. And by that I mean the Daily Planet newspapers, where I see a certain Bat character popped up a few times. I think the Goonies may have shown up as well.
Which one?
The Goonies.
Yeah, that's Wilfredo. Yeah. Richard Pryor's Wilfredo. The bingo machine in Perry's office is Wilfredo.
Did Shaggy make an appearance? I'm trying to find the
Shaggy's in there.
Shaggy is in there.
Bonnie Miller's in there. I'm trying to think what else. He had this thing. I had never even seen this thing before, but like this crazy Brainiac ship that looks like a light bulb. You know, you put that in there. When Lex Luthor's flying away in the hot air balloon at the end, he's wearing the purple and green outfit from the cartoon.
Right.
You know? So like that's all Wilfredo. You know, I wouldn't even know. I mean, I know Goonies and things, but like I wouldn't know or even think to put in that kind of deep continuity stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So it became really fun for you getting to see each page, and you're discovering all these little Easter eggs.
Yeah,
oh my God.
Yeah. Also, as a writer, like I try not to impose too much on the artist, you know. Like I don't want to be like, and this is let's put the bingo machine in this one. You know what I mean? Like let me tell this. Let me write the story and what the plot is and the dialogue and things. And
sure.
But I don't want to tell the artist, you know, every granular detail. You know, leave that to them to decide what they want to do. And like I say, he puts so much love into all that stuff. I'm trying to think, and I don't know. I wouldn't even call it an Easter egg, but like I wanted to put thought beasts in there, you know, but I don't know if that's an Easter egg. So there were certain things that I brought up, but 99.9% of it is all him, you know.
Well, you said, you know, no matter what happens next, wherever your career goes, you know, you'll always be the guy that wrote Superman 78. But in the dust jacket of this bad boy, you kind of let a cat out of the bag here. So I don't want you to get in any trouble. We're not going to poke you for details you can't give yet. But there is another addition or a sequel series coming to Superman 78. Have you begun work on that yet?
Yeah, I've already written the whole thing. Yeah, I turned in the final draft of the last script, I think like a week before the book came out.
Wow.
So it's all done. Yeah. So my guess would be late this year, early next year, it'll be out, you know?
Now is the whole gang getting back together?
No, Wilfredo will not be working on a new one. He's got another project he's working on. There is a new artist already working on it. Who's doing a great job, but obviously I don't want to say who that is. But yeah, I'm super excited about it. It's just, you know, more of the same concept as far as telling another story set in the same universe with those rules. But now we're working with Superman 1, Superman 2, and Superman 78, the graphic novel. So like the world's getting bigger, you know. So it'll be a different villain, one we haven't seen before. Lex is still in it. I'm trying to think what I can say and what I shouldn't say, you know.
And, can you confirm that the collected edition, when you remove the dust jacket, will be a laser disc?
Yeah. What's next?
What's coming? Okay.
It's going to be an 8-track tape. Is what we're going to do. So
The soundtrack.
Square format, you know.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I hope they continue with the VHS. The VHS cover. But so yeah, that story's already done. It's being drawn now. And, you know, they'll make more announcements about it soon, I guess, you know.
Not poking for details at all, but rather for you, was it comfortable to continue this, or do you feel like you've put more pressure because you already got your dream job and that was so successful? So now, you know, like, uh-oh. No,
I'm comfortable doing more stories, you know. Like,
awesome.
I mean, obviously the easy thing is always to just, you know, leave when you're on top or whatever.
Sure.
Like as reserved as I kind of am, and as cautious and as I am in like my daily life, you know, I've never really tried to avoid, I don't know, for lack of a better word, disaster in my career. You know what I mean? Like if
swing for the fences.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If there was ever like a like when they asked me to write Green Lantern, like at the time when I started writing Green Lantern, no lie, I'd maybe written 10 single issue comic books in my life, and like 4 of them had seen print, you know? Like I'm a brand new comic book writer, brand new superhero writer, and they asked me to write Green Lantern after Jeff Johns. Like that's a suicide run, right? Like,
Right.
why would you do that, you know?
Legend.
Yeah, but for me, I was like, you know, I come from a blue collar background. You know, the idea that I would get paid to make shit up in my head is like
Fantastic.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. And so I would rather swing for the fences, you know, and be the guy sitting at the bar who said, I took my shot and I crashed and burned, as opposed to the guy sitting at the bar who says, what if I'd taken that shot?
Heck
you know?
yeah.
And I got beat up in those early Green Lantern issues, you know, and I go back now, and if I were to go back and read that new 52 stuff, a lot of it's not very good. I was learning a lot, not just about how to write Green Lantern, but how to write superhero comics and even how to write comics. You know, a lot of it was like learning on the job. But I'm very proud of Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, because by that time I think I'd figured it out, and you know, I really understood who those characters were and what I wanted to do with them. And I had like a large plan and all that kind of stuff. And so as much as I might not like, you know, all of that new 52 stuff I did, that's the brick in the wall thing. I don't get to Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps without having those bricks, you know? And so it doesn't bother me. Like a lot of people, I mean, you guys know what comic book fans are like, right? And so any kind of fans, not just comic book fans, right? Any kind of fandom of any kind, right? Like they love to pile on, you know, and to this day, there's people out there who talk about I'm a shitty writer because my new 52 Green Lantern was terrible. And I have 2 thoughts about that. One thought is all of us were shitty writers at some point. Like, you know what I mean? Like I would like to think I'm better now, you know, and you could go back and you could read whatever it was, 87 issues of Green Lantern I wrote when all was said and done. You know, people didn't think I'd make it 12. 87 issues I wrote. You go back and read all of those in a row and you will see me grow as a writer, you know? And that's fine because that's what we all do, you know? And the other thing about it, I mean, nobody likes to hear that kind of criticism, obviously, right? I mean, we're all people, and as writers or creators of any kind, like if you're doing it right, you're doing things that come from your heart and they're tied to you personally in some way, whether it's life experiences you had or art that you've enjoyed or whatever, and you're putting them now on the page for people to dissect and say is terrible, right? So you don't like to hear that it's terrible because in some ways they're saying that you're terrible. But it was with the Green Lantern criticism in the beginning, it kind of didn't make sense to me because, or I guess I understand you go into a comic book shop and you spend your money on a comic, you want it to be as good as can be, right? But also, I think it's like, hasn't anybody ever had a first day on the job, you know? And it's kind of like if you got a new job and like you replaced a salesman who'd been selling for 30 years and was like the best guy in the industry. And now you're new and you've only been, this is your first sales job. And like your first day, they come over the cubicle and they go, you suck.
Oh, why have we sold everything yet?
Like I just got here. You know what I mean? Like whatever you do for a living, guy on Twitter, your first day on the job, like did you do it like a 20-year veteran? You know what I mean? Like I followed Jeff Johns, who's like reinvented the character, is like a modern master of the medium, was the chief creative officer of DC Comics, right? I come in and basically a guy who came out of a box packing room. And you tell me I don't write as good as him and I suck? It's like, I know I don't write as good as him. But let's see where I'm at. You know, give me some time, just like you would want your first day on the job, you know?
You know, somebody being an ass like that, I just love that that's like, you just kind of created a Superman response of, hey, guy on Twitter, comma, you know, instead of going with the name clone, like guy on Twitter, listen up.
Yeah,
like
I want you to, I'd encourage you to think about this differently, and you might be a more well-adjusted, happier person if you do. Like, that's great.
I don't let that bother me. I don't let that kind of criticism bother me. Like sometimes somebody will say something, I'll be like, that's a good point, man. Why didn't I think about that? That bums me out, you know? But criticism like that, I don't let bother me, because the other side of it is too, like my grandmother's 94, right? Like she tells everybody she knows that I write comic books and that I write Superman or Green Lantern or whatever. And it's like, you know, my mom's proud of me. You know what I mean?
Fantastic.
Like my kid goes to school when he was little in elementary school and tells his friends that his dad writes Green Lantern, and they call him a liar because it's so inconceivable to him, right? And so, like, dude on Twitter, like, you can't phase me. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't even know you. And in a way, I find it kind of amusing that you think you can phase me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean,
the wonders of modern living and all the tools and
again, it's
pitfalls
fine,
of
right?
the internet.
It's fine. It's not me saying that if you criticize something, you're wrong or whatever, right? Like, somebody who thinks that I'm the best writer in the world and somebody who thinks that I'm the worst writer in the world, they're both right? It's art. Like, it's not math. There is no answer, right? And I'll never have it all figured out. And it's not figure outable. It's art, right? So, like, people's opinions are completely correct. You know, like, I can't dispute somebody who says I'm a bad writer. And just like I can't dispute somebody who says I'm a good one. The one who says I'm a good writer is more right than the guy who says I'm a bad one.
I would say so.
Neither one is right. Neither one is right or wrong. It's just more the approach to it sometimes that you take.
Well, I tell you what, Robert, for me, reading your stuff over the years, when this project was announced and that you were the writer on it, I was pumped. I'm like, this is a great guy for this. Without even knowing that, the really great details you shared about your history, with the Donner movies and Christopher Reeve movies. I just knew what I've seen of you and the voice you have, and the Superman stories I'd read before and the Justice League issues you'd written. I'm like, this is going to be solid. I was optimistic from the beginning, and as the issues came out, I got a chance to read them. I was pleased and pleased and pleased. I loved it. And it reads even better to me in the collected edition. So it's really been great having you here with this out recently. Obviously, listeners can go to their bookstores or Amazon or wherever else you would email you for a direct link someplace. I don't know how all this works. But what other stuff besides Superman 78 could you let them know they could check out of yours before we start to wrap up here?
So I do a lot of stuff for a company called Bad Idea. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with them, but they're a smaller company that started up about 2 years ago. They publish their stuff in real limited runs. They only sell them in, I think, 250 stores in the world. So I'm doing like a lot of original concepts with them. I have a bunch of unannounced projects I can't really talk about. Got another thing with DC that I'm working on that hasn't been announced yet. I also do adaptations of a lot of children's novels.
That Percy Jackson's been a big thing for you, right?
Yeah, I'll do all the Percy Jackson and Heroes of Olympus novels. I adapted the first book in a new series called Tristan Strong. That's also with Hyperion. It's one of the Rick Riordan Presents book series, and the adaptation of that came out yesterday. I'm trying to think what else.
You popped up in the extra on the latest Green Lantern Beware My Power.
I haven't seen
movie.
it.
You haven't seen that yet? Okay.
I know. I remember I did the interview, obviously, but like it's only on the Blu-ray, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think digitally too. But I mean, it just popped up and Robert, and I was like, and I sent a picture to her. I was like, hey, that's Robert.
Did I come out all right? I don't know.
It came out all right. You seemed like you were someone that knew what you were talking about.
A learned gentleman.
Yes, a learned gentleman.
I haven't seen it. I'll have to pick it up.
I'd like to echo a little bit right before we wrap up that Batman 89, Superman 78 are both announced. I'm over the moon on Batman 89. Really excited for Superman 78, but it's not a comparison game. But I think Superman 78 kind of really knocked me on my ass in a good way. In the fact of I adored the book. It made me like the movie even more. So I hope you take that as a compliment in the sense of first issue to the last, the whole thing. I just thought it was awesome. And yeah, I read the whole thing in one sitting yesterday, and knowing I was going to talk to you today about it too. And yeah, I just think I love this book. So I know you didn't tell us anything about the next volume, but I'm looking forward to it.
Hopefully you'll know soon. Yeah.
Yes.
But thank you very much. I appreciate
Absolutely
that. And I'm super stoked to be able to do more. Anytime I get to spend writing Superman is time well spent, and especially to be able to, for DC to have enough faith in us as a team, and for the response to the original to have been as positive as it was. That's a great feeling. I don't take it lightly. And so, I'd love to do more, so as long as people keep buying them, hopefully we can keep doing them.
Keep getting us to double dip.
Yeah. And hopefully, when they do, maybe we can talk you into coming back at some point. And then who knows, maybe between now and then, Robert, you'll have this like lightning to the brain idea about a Batman story you want to tell and shock the world on that one.
I did one 8-page Batman story one time, and it was I don't remember why I did it.
We don't talk about that.
Was it in a Walmart special?
Yes, but they reprinted it in the Detective Comics 1000 hardcover.
Yeah. That's where I have it.
Okay.
That's the only Walmart. That's the only Batman story I ever did. But they ended up using it for like this Walmart 80th anniversary Detective Comics issue that was all reprints of Batman's first appearance, Robin's first appearance, whatever, and then this new story. I think Hush, the first issue of Hush maybe was in there or something. I don't know. It was a lot of reprint stuff. And then this was original, this 8-page story. I didn't know it at the time, but this thing was like super rare. They printed like 4,000 of them, and it only went out to certain Walmarts as like a test that they put on end caps. Let's see who buys them if we position them in certain places and cross merchandise with other things or whatever. And so from what they told me at DC, it was one of the rarest Batman things that was published in I don't even know how long, because there's only like a few thousand of them. Like I think 4,000 is the number they told me. And so they sent me comps of them, and I had comps of them, and I went to a convention. I always just put my stuff on the table and I sell it, at cover price or whatever. You know what I mean? I don't mark things up generally or whatever. But I think I was selling this for like $10. And some guy came up and bought one right away. And then he walked off 20 minutes later. He came back and bought another one. And I was like,
I must have
what's going on with this thing here, And so I went on eBay, and it was like a $200 comic, and I was
my gosh!
And so I pulled the other ones off the table and put them underneath, and I still have them, But that's the only Batman story other than Justice League that I
love that Justice League. I'm actually surprised when I read that, and I know I can keep talking to you forever, so I promise we'll wrap it up here. But when I read that run on Justice League, I was like, man, Robert must have been a big fan of the Reign of the Superman storyline in 93, 94. And then, as I was researching, I'm like, oh my gosh, because I read an interview where you kind of talked about, really got into comics later. I'm like, that book reads like a story that someone's had in their mind since they read Reign of the Superman, 30 years ago now. It's one of my favorite storylines in that post Scott Snyder, James Tynion run on Justice League. I just think I've gone back and reread that a bunch of times. So thank you for that. Thank you for Superman 78. Thanks for spending time with us today. It's really been a pleasure. I've always enjoyed interacting with you on Twitter. You're always really gracious. And really, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And anytime you guys want to have me back, just drop me a line.
I will absolutely do that.
Awesome. I'll wear a Superman shirt that time.
We both will. Man, I have, I don't want to say this just in case other people we've had on the show for interviews are listening. I've had the chance to interview some cool people on this show. That was one of my favorite interviews. What an incredible, just gracious with his time and really answered any and every question I had on my list. And he got to a bunch of them before we even had to ask him. How great's that?
Yeah, I love it. I love that. I mean, he let us know that the next volume is written.
Right.
So he's sitting there talking to us and be like, fools, I know what's coming. You don't know.
I feel like but it's also fair that could we drop some exclusive news that we know that Robert Venditti has turned in finished scripts and the art?
Slap an exclusive.
Oh my gosh.
Beast. But I do mean it. And
Stop
I
the
hope,
press.
I'd tell you, but I mean, I was glad that I was able to tell him that I meant every word of with Superman 78. I bleed Batman and then I bleed
Black.
Little Green because I love that Ninja Turtles.
Sure.
But man, when this announcement came out of the 89 and 78 series, I was like, oh my God, Batman 89. Well, yeah, I'll read Superman 78 too. That was just my genuine reaction. But as I mean, as the book came out, it's just like,
it's special.
Man, I love this book, and it really did put me in a Superman the movie mood.
Oh man,
of going back and watching that just a few months ago, and I don't know, it did make me like the movie more. Right now, I'm on a little bit of like that Christopher Reeve high. I don't know, his book's kind of responsible for that. I mean, the whole team's involved, but it wasn't just me, kissing ass because he's here.
Because we got a
It's
big
like,
star
no, dude,
comic book
seriously.
writer on the show. Yeah.
It's like, hey, Garrett and I are Midwest nice, but what we are not is liars.
No, we'll be honest.
I would have not said anything if I didn't mean it. So I hope that he understood that. And then, of course, I mean, give me more VHS hardcovers. I mean,
So
come
cool.
on. Which one's coming for Batman 89? So
yeah, just a great concept. I think it was a fantastic project. I knew, right away. I had asked and communicated with Robert a long time ago when it was when it was announced. Like, hey man, it might be a little clunky to fit on a Batman podcast, but I'd sure like to have you on at some point. And then when the collected edition, this thing, they announced the collected edition pretty quick. This was a big hit for DC. And I said, what about this summer when the hardcover comes out? It's like, write it down. So I've been looking forward to this episode for a long time, listeners. I hope you enjoyed it as much as Ryan and I did. Ryan, before we wrap up here, if someone just was tuning in just for Venditti for the first time and hasn't heard you plug your stuff, let them know where they could keep hearing things from you.
Well, I know there's like 740 characters between Superman and Batman for him. Batman's at the top for me. But that's okay. I like the big red and blue as well. So I spend a lot of my time doing nothing but Batman's talk and stuff. So I mean, this was fun I will talk Batman all day, every day, but then to get to talk something else was great too. But in short, you can find all of my reviews, interviews, and posts on Batman on Film proper, including my podcast, the Batman Book Club. The Garrett Grev here has been on a number of times. He's going to be on again soon. He has some homework to do of finding a spooky comic book to be on the show with in October. But you can listen to that wherever you listen to podcasts where I explore, Batman comics. And you don't have to be a nerd to listen. Like, you can listen because we all like nerdy things and we all like not nerdy things, But yeah, wherever you get podcasts, you can find that. Also, Bill is very generous and posts every episode on Batman on Film proper, and follow that on Twitter at the Batman BC for upcoming episodes and episode drops. And I can tell you some really fun things are coming up, as well as for Batman on Film. Pay attention to that because some more fun things are coming up that I get to be involved with.
God darn it, I like fun, Ryan. It's always fun having you on the show and getting to record together. So I'll look forward to the spooky stuff because Halloween's fun, right?
I love Halloween.
Comics are fun. Robert Venditti's a fun writer. We're going to do fun Halloween stuff, and I love to keep the fun going. And you can help me do that over on Twitter. You can follow me at Garrett Wato. That is at GarrettWato. For you, if you'd like to get all the updates about what's new on the site, what new episodes to the BatPod Network have been posted, where is the news or opinion items that you need so much in your life over on the website, you can do that by following The Batman on Film. That is at The Batman on Film, all one word. And if there's anything you'd like to hear about, maybe it's an idea for an upcoming episode, maybe it's a writer or a creative in the comic space you'd like me to try to hunt down and get to come on the show, you'll have to wish me luck. You can send me that in an email. Do that at garrett.grev@batmanonfilm.com. That's garret.grev@batman-on-film.com. And remember, it's not who you are underneath. It's what you do that defines you. And I never lie.
You have been listening to the official podcast of the one and only Batman on Film website. On Twitter, follow BOF at Batman on Film and the Batman Podcast Network at BatPod Network. For Jet and everyone at Batman on Film, I'm announcer Rachel. Thanks for listening to the authoritative, definitive, the original Batman on Film.